Okay, are we about ready to get started? Let's do that. Just to answer that question real quickly on which Quran to use, I would encourage you to get a Quran. Go ahead and do that. And for those of you who live in London, or I'm sorry, anywhere in Britain, I'm sure even in Italy, you can go to any mosque, just say that you're interested in reading the Quran, and they'll probably give it to you free. And they'll give you an Italian translation with Arabic. If they don't, ask them for a Arabic English or Arabic Italian side by side, for very good reasons. If you quote from some of the things I'm going to give you today, they'll say it's not in the Quran. So then you can just open up and show exactly what we're talking about. These cost about £10. There are a number of English translations that you can use. They will want you to use this one, which is Yusuf Ali or Marmaduke Pickthall. Marmaduke Pickthall was a convert. Yusuf Ali is from Pakistan. Those are what I call apologetical translations. They're absolutely hopeless translations. Is that a question?
Yeah. How's that rule of Khan regarded?
Khan is along the same lines as Marmaduke Pickthall.
So that's okay. It's kosher for them.
It's kosher for them,
Halal.
but it's going to be a terrible translation.
Yeah, okay.
It's a halal one, yeah, you're right. It mistranslates right, left, and center. Case in point, if you open up Surah 4, Ayah 34, which is the famous verse about women. Men are protectors of women, but if they should disobey you, then you may admonish them. And then after that, you may cast them from your bed, and then you may beat them lightly, it says. There's no lightly in the Arabic, and so they put the lightly in there for apologetical reasons. So they do this all the time. Surah 19:33, which talks about Jesus, and Jesus says about himself, "Blessed be on me the day that I was born, the day that I die, and the day that I rise again," seeming to insinuate that he died and rose again. What they have done is they put it into a future tense. Blessed be on me the day I was born, the day I will die, and the day I will rise again. But it's not in the Arabic. There's no future tense in the Arabic. And the easy way to know that is to go back to verse 15 in that chapter 19, to verse 15, which has John the Baptist saying exactly the same words. And he says, "Blessed be me the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I rise again," which is obvious mean that John the Baptist did die. So you can see the context there. It's the same context. It's an internal contradiction, obviously, because it contradicts Surah 4, 157, which is the classic ayah that talks about the death, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The fact that Jesus Christ did not die, someone else took his place. That's in Surah 4, 157. So you can see there's a tension there. And to alleviate that tension, they just mistranslate. So if you want to have a good translation, go to Arbery. Arbery. That's the best translation. It does to the Arabic what the NASB does to the Greek and the Hebrew. It's literal translation. It can be sometimes difficult to read because of that, but at least you know what you're reading is what's in the text. Rodman is also good. Rodman. Rodman and Arbery. And pretty much if you go to a good bookstore in Britain, that's the only ones you'll see on the shelves. They don't ever sell Yusuf Ali or Pickthall, or at least I'm not aware of any good bookstore selling Pickthall. They refuse to sell them. But the Muslims will use them. All right? So whenever I'm down at Speaker's Corner or whenever I'm on campus, I will use Yusuf Ali because that's what they expect and that's what they're used to. But when I'm doing my own study at home, then I use Arbery. All right? Okay, let's get right into it. My name is Jay Smith. Some of you were here yesterday, so you know my background. I won't do that again. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to look at the Quran, and here's a Quran here. It's about the size of our New Testament, about 5,000 verses. And Amy did a pretty good job of explaining what the Quran is, how it's put together. You have basically two great divisions in the Quran. You have the Meccan surahs and the Medinan surahs. And if you just take the Quran and divide it in half, you pretty much, rule of thumb, can pretty much get the Meccan and Medinan surahs. It's roughly anywhere from the first 19 to 20 surahs, the first 19 to 20 books would be your Medinan surahs, and then from 20 or 21 all the way to 114 would be the second half, which would be your Meccan surahs. And the big difference between those, as Amy said, is the Meccan surahs are much shorter. That's why you have so many more numbers in there, and the Medinan are much longer. But content-wise, there's a huge difference, enormous amount of difference. The Meccan surahs, when you read them, there's lots of stories about people that we know, a lot of the prophets, Abraham, Moses, Dawud, Yahya, John the Baptist, Isa, Jesus. we would recognize many of the characters, but we would not recognize the stories. The stories are quite different, and I'll say why that is and what the reason we're looking at that for the first time. The Medinan accounts, which are the first part, though they're the first part of the Quran, they are then revealed to the Prophet later from 622 to 632, the last 10 years of his life, much longer, and they deal more with his life and what's happening in Medina. And so therefore you get a lot more references to situations that are going on during his life, primarily the situations with the battles, the Battle of Badr, the Battle of Uhud, the Battle of the Trenches in 624, 625, and 627. And it's these battles and the repercussions that come out. Some of the difficulties he's having with his wives are there. And so therefore, much of the material in Medina would refer to what was happening in Medina. And so what scholars are trying to say today is that really belongs in the 7th century. It's not relevant for today. Let's go back to the Meccan surahs, which are much more universalistic in content. They deal with who God is, who we are, what our responsibility is before God, the obedience, the submission we are to give God. That's relevant for the 21st century, the 20th century. Let's only use those surahs. Men like Fazlur Rahman made that statement, and he had to leave Pakistan and live the rest of his life in Chicago for making a simple statement like that. But that's a tension that's happening within Muslim circles today as to what part of the Quran they're going to now look at as or see as universal. You can see it's a debate that we also have with the Old and New Testament, but much more dynamic because it's definitely not over a period of 1,500 years they're talking about. They're talking about a period of only 22 to 23 years. Now, what I like to do when I'm with my Muslim friends is I like to ask them or find out what their claims are for the Quran. Ask them, and do that with your friends. Ask them to tell you why is it they consider this to be the Word of God. What are the claims they make? And who's had this conversation with Muslims before? Anybody here? What do they say about their Quran?
That it's perfect.
Okay, it's perfect, all right. How? In what way?
If you could only read it in its original language, it would be quite unlike any other book. It's just excellent quality.
Beautiful Arabic. It's poetic. All right, that's true. What else? It's his miracle, which would follow on from what Peter is saying, because if it's perfect, how could a man write something so beautiful? How could a man write something that is so poetic? A man who's illiterate doesn't write. He couldn't write. Could he come up with something like that? And that's the one miracle they're looking for, because there's no other miracle that Muhammad refers to. In fact, when asked that question in the Quran 3 times, he says, why is it you asked me to show you a miracle? All the prophets before me did miracles. You didn't believe them. Why should I expect you to believe me? Not much of a defense. But that's, therefore, the only miracle they can come up with is the Quran itself. All right, what else do they claim about the Quran? It's perfect as far as its poetry. What else? Okay, no contradictions. Yeah, there are no contradictions. Anything else? No errors, which would go along with the contradictions. All right? And the word they like to give, and I hear it all the time, is it is inimitable. They love that word. It is inimitable. It has no weaknesses. So it is perfect in its grammar. It's perfect in its Arabic, and we talked about that a little bit last night. It has no contradiction, has no errors. Let them say this and pull them out and hear what they're doing with the Quran. And then once they have said these things, then start looking at each one of these areas. And that's what we're going to do real quickly right now. Let's look at some of the claims they make. It's unique. The hadith, Mishkat al-Masabi. Mishkat al-Masabi is a compilation of the 6 most authoritative hadith. Hadith would be the sayings of the Prophet. We'll get into that a little bit later. And this is what it says. The Quran is the greatest wonder among the wonders of the world. I'm reading the paper you have in front of you. If you don't have a copy, come on down here. There are copies. If you're all giving. The Quran is the greatest wonder among the wonders of the world. This book is second to none in the world according to the unanimous decision of the learned men in points of diction, style, rhetoric, thoughts, and soundness of law and regulations to shape the destinies of mankind. Therefore, bring a chapter like unto it is a common claim. And this comes from Surah 10, ayah 37 to 38, and also from Surah 2, ayah 23, Surah 17, 88. Usually whenever I'm having a debate with Muslims, this is usually the last thing they come up. This is their, if they bring this claim, I pretty much know that they don't have any other ammo. They're on their last legs. They usually go to this as a last gasp reference. Because in the Quran it does say there's nothing that can equal it. Now, has anybody had a Muslim do this to them? What we call the surah like it argument. If that happens, Open up the Bible. This is what I love to do. I was at Trafalgar Square. Every year they have a rally for Islam at Trafalgar Square, the Muhajirun do. And Sheikh Umar Bakri Muhammad asked me to come down to do a debate with him there. And we've had 2 debates there at the Trafalgar Square in August, back about 2 or 3 years ago. And we got up there and we had a debate on the Quran. And this was his last gasp effort. He finally turned to me and said, Mr. Smith, produce a surah like it. Produce anything that is of equal beauty.